Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U. Just got done with our Miami Hurricanes second spring practice. Again, not in full pads today, but did get a viewing period of about 30 minutes, which was great. Then offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson and defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman spoke after practice. I'll have some notes on what they had to say, especially with Coach Heatherman. Definitely want to share those. But first, the viewing period. I paid a lot of attention to the wide receivers. And just going back to the video and from the first practice, watching Darian Mensah, I do want to point out that I really think that just these couple days of practices and watching Darian throw and some things that they're working on, I think they're definitely going to use a quick game that definitely can be a part of this offense. With how Darian throws it, I think he does a good job with his angles, his arm slot delivery, just watching him throw some passes. Also, obviously with Malachi Tony, get the ball to him as quickly as possible. But I think the other guys, whether it's those tunnel wide receiver screens that we saw last season, I just feel like that's going to be a part of this offense. And I think that's going to be key for some of these wide receivers if they can excel, not just Malachi, but these other guys, and be able to get yards after catch. I think that'll be big. Not that they can't throw the ball downfield, and not that Darian can't be effective in the intermediate passing game, which he can, and he showed last year at Duke and before that at Tulane. But I just feel like just kind of watching it and kind of seeing how things transpire, it just feels like that short, quick passing game is going to be very important for this offense. Again, just 2 days into it, just some early observations. And Coach Dawson said after practice that, it's really important for him as he works with another new quarterback here, just that he finds out what offense and what plays work best for this particular team, for this particular quarterback. That's important for him, and I think that's good to hear, as opposed to having a system now. Obviously, Shannon Dawson has the things that he likes to do, but I think he's going to pay close attention, like he has done in the past, of finding what this team does best with its personnel. And obviously with the passing game, having Malachi Tony as your headliner, that's certainly a great place to start. And just Malachi, the excitement around him, saw it today in practice. About 20 kids were here to watch practice, and they were cheering for Malachi, always shouting his name during practice. You just don't see that very often. Even when you have kids or observers in here, you don't see them typically cheering for one player. So I thought that was great, a great environment. And certainly, I think that just kind of encapsulates what Malachi has kind of brought to this team, a genuine excitement around the country, not just locally with local kids that look up to him, but there is a huge buzz around him. And, just the other day, I had a friend that's a Florida State fan, for example, that was asking about Malachi. Just there's an excitement surrounding Malachi. And look, the best way to kind of describe him, and just these 2 days in particular, when you watch him, and obviously we got to see him do everything that he did on the field, but in practices, he's a guy going first in line, and when he makes catches, it doesn't matter what the route is. It could be something quick, a quick drag route, or maybe a curl route, something small, but he's always excelling in that route or in that rep. You can see his explosion, you can see his speed and quickness. It doesn't matter, just as soon as he gets the ball, and this could be on air. This isn't necessarily him against a defender even. It's clear to see with his talent and his abilities, and that's great to see. And just kind of sharing that, and again, everyone's certainly excited to see what he does in year two. All eyes on him for sure, but again, just a lot of buzz with him. Certainly there's a lot of buzz with the other wide receivers, but just in a different way of basically how are these guys going to fit in? What kind of impact are they going to make this year? You have a mix of returners looking to take a step up. You also have the incoming transfer portal guys, and then maybe some freshmen kind of get in the mix. But let's start with a group of three that have been working together essentially in that same position as they kind of go through reps there. And it's South Carolina transfer Vandrevius Jacobs. You have him with Milan Paris, a freshman, as well as Tyran Evans, another freshman. So those are your big guys on the outside, kind of working different reps there. And with Jacobs, look, he was a big play guy at South Carolina. I think he has a chance to kind of evolve a little bit in terms of his skill set at Miami with what they want to do with him and how he kind of fits in. And certainly, productive in some of his catches last year, leading South Carolina in different categories receiving. But I think for him, more consistency is always going to be the key. But just watching him, he's done a good job. These first couple days, he's making catches during these reps. Again, watching a lot of drill work, watching some defense going against some defenders, but he's done a pretty good job. But I think for him, the whole spring is going to be big for him, as well as all these other guys too, as they're trying to fit into the offense and kind of establish themselves. But certainly, I think you look at Jacobs as an outside guy. All these guys are going to be outside guys, essentially, because with what they want to do with Malachi, he's going to be controlling most of the right there in those inside reps. But also too, Coach Dawson mentioned, Malachi doesn't get tired, so he's going to be out there. Whereas the wide receivers on the outside are the guys that take a lot of reps because they are running a lot more. So he's looking forward to having some depth there because of how much they run during games. And then two other transfers, paying close attention to them as well as Vandravius, and that's Cooper Barcade out of Duke. Obviously he has that connection with Darian. And then obviously watching Cam Vaughn. He's a guy that intrigues me a little bit on the outside. Again, able to see him make some plays and looking forward to seeing him throughout the spring. And Cooper too. These guys are both reliable, and all three of these guys want to make sure that they have big roles on this team, these transfer wide receivers. And I think a guy to kind of pay attention to this spring and maybe a little bit overlooked based on how last year went, not a lot of reps, and that's Dalen Upshaw. Look, Dalen's a guy that the staff feels very comfortable and confident in. They've kind of pointed out last season that he flashed and whatnot. He does get the number changed to number 7. And one of the things I think is great too is, he's really close with Malachi Toney. They have a really close connection, a close bond. I think that only helps when you have a close connection with someone that has already proven themselves. So I think that can help in your own development. But Dalen is right there too. He's got this, he definitely has a good quick twitch on his reps. You're seeing him kind of go through his movements. So I think this is a big spring for Dalen. And those other guys that are coming in, those 3 guys are a little bit more established, or they have more experience than Dalen. But I think definitely watching him throughout the spring is going to be key. And I think it's an important spring for him because this is a chance for him to really elevate himself or stay in that mix. Is he going to be one of those top 5 guys? Or is he going to be one of those top 4, top 3 even? Will he prove to be better than these 3 new guys coming in, these new transfers? So I think it's a big spring for him. And Josh Moore in year 2 as well. I haven't seen him out here this week. Don't know what's going on there, but he's another guy that could have a spring, could be very beneficial for him as he builds to hopefully having a good sophomore season. I think a guy like Josh is a little bit different because of his skill set and his size, a little bit of a different thing. And I think when you don't have other guys like him, because Cooper, Cam, and Dre aren't that same size, as Josh. So Josh can just, or Dalen even, and obviously Malachi, but Josh can just do different things because of his size that's a little bit different. So I think he's in a little bit different of a category and a different situation, but certainly this is a big year for him as well going into year 2. And I already briefly mentioned the freshman receivers in Paris and Evans, but there's 2 other receivers too in this class, with Van Spafford, the speed guy, a lot of speed there, and then also Samari and Wingo. And I think just watching them these first couple days, again, no pads, and a lot of just drill work that we're able to watch, I think they've done a good job. They've shown flashes. They look the part, and with Vance and his speed, you can see it. And Wingo, also with his size, he's got good size at 6'1", 6'2", and I think he's, both of these guys are looking to kind of crack that rotation, in the sense of, if I already mentioned all those other guys ahead of them, in terms of the transfers, the 3 guys with experience at Miami, that's 6 right there. Can one of those other guys, can one of these freshmen really get in the mix there? But regardless, spring's always big for these guys. Development, get used to it, and as we saw last year with Malachi, or even Dalen, as the year went on, was able to find himself a role. So that'll be kind of the thing to watch for with Wingo and Spafford, but certainly Spafford's speed is certainly intriguing with what he's bringing to the table. So during our viewing period, cornerback Xavier Lucas made a great interception on the half-field drill. Basically, it started around the 40 yard line and tracks back all the way to the end zone, jumps up, leaping catch, 2-handed interception. I thought it was just a great play by him. It's very hard to do for cornerbacks getting interceptions in general. It is not an easy thing unless you're jumping the route, like we saw today. I mean, Jontavius Wyman had a nice play, nice interception where he jumped a route and got a pick. But the play in particular with Xavier, who's going to be one of their top corners once again, and it's great that they're bringing back these guys at cornerback and providing a lot of depth, and I expect it to be very similar rotation-wise, unless one of these guys just truly emerges amongst the guys and gets a majority of the reps. I just thought it was a great play by Xavier Lucas there with that interception, and that might be an area where this group could be better next season. These cornerbacks finishing off plays with interceptions, which is tough to do for a cornerback. They had some pass breakups last season, and the team as a whole did a good job turning the ball over, 25 takeaways on the season. But I think at the cornerback position, if they're able to add that, to intercept passes and really create plays, and today they had a drill that they actually worked on in terms of, scoring touchdown. After you get a defensive takeaway, working on scoring. So that's important to this staff. And Coach Heatherman does a great job always in interview sessions of explaining himself and explaining his thoughts and philosophy and kind of with where the team is in different position groups. And I was actually able to pull him aside afterwards and ask him about the cornerback interception thing. And, one thing, I thought this was great how he explained it, was essentially, yes, it's a point of emphasis, but for him and for the staff, they want to make sure that the development is always going to be key. And he said he's a D3 coach by trade, so player development's always going to be important for him. But he talked about it essentially as a cornerback, there's phases in the development and the play in terms of technique. You kind of get that down, making sure you're in the right position, using your right hands. And obviously your footwork is always key as a cornerback. But then another phase is finishing it off, not just with the PBU, but with an interception. And he said, they want to make sure that they're doing all those things. And one of the ways that this staff wants to make sure that the cornerbacks are creating plays or coming down with interceptions is these guys are on the jugs machines, and that's great to hear, because obviously you need to improve that as a skill, for a cornerback, for any defensive backs to be good on the jugs. It's not like a wide receiver. Your hands typically aren't quite as good as wide receivers who use the jugs machines all the time, but that is going to be something in terms of a skill development. They want to make sure that these defensive backs, cornerbacks, are doing a good job and kind of improve their hands. So that's something to watch for. But he did say, again, they just have to make sure that each phase is done properly, and that's kind of gives you the result that you're looking for in the back end with completing it with an interception. And I think it's just good mentality to have, and essentially making sure that they're working on all phases. So that'll just be something I'll be paying attention to throughout the spring. Are these cornerbacks, again, good experience from all of them, and a lot of high-level experience that a lot of them got in the playoff run. But how can they be better this season? I think that's the key for all the returners. You always want to improve, but, and just speaking about improvement too, Heatherman pointed this out, and I thought it was great. He said, with Coach Cristobal, they want to find areas how they can be better as a team. That's always important. So one year to the next, how can we be better in certain areas, but also for an individual player. And they make it a point of emphasis to relay that message to the players and communicate that where they could be better at. And Coach Heatherman did say too, it is up to the players. Essentially how much they care about their own craft, essentially how much they love the game, how much will they take that information that they get from the coaching staff and apply it to themselves, either putting in an extra work or taking a concerted effort during practices to make sure they're improving on those certain areas. And obviously at the college game, there's plenty of room for improvement, but that'll be something to watch for, in particular, that I'll be paying attention to with these cornerbacks. If anyone's kind of separating themselves, or if there'll be more plays like what we saw today with Xavier Lucas, the leaping two-handed grab interception in the end zone, was great to see. So definitely we'll be paying attention to it. Just a few other notes from Coach Dawson and Coach Heatherman. Heatherman had some positive things to say about freshman safety J.J. Dunnigan, who's doing a good job, not just athletically stepping in here, but also asking a lot of questions. So that's good to hear. You always want to hear that with guys when they first get to a program. So that's good to hear. Also kind of just talking more about the defensive line and Damon Wilson in particular, the edge rusher. He's next up. He's the one that is expected to be playing at a high level. He played at a really high level at Missouri last year at that rush end spot. But here at Miami, he's going to be expected to do that, and really looking forward to hearing how he does. And some of the things that Coach Heatherman was saying about him was kind of some of the things I've been hearing also, when I talk to his teammates, as I mentioned last update, just, his knowledge of the game, understanding what he needs to do. All these are important factors, in addition to being a highly athletic player there as a rush end. And a few notes from Coach Dawson. He had good things to say about freshman quarterback Darian Coleman. Said, Luke Nickel, Judd Anderson, been in the system longer, understand the offense, but he said Darian's actually done a pretty good job, and it almost surprised him a little bit with how he's been able to pick up on things. And Darian's been kind of one of these guys, these first couple of days, been kind of some buzz amongst the reporters, because when you watch Darian, I mean, the way he throws it, just lasers, really. I mean, it just comes out fast. He throws it hard, pretty accurate, but he just throws it differently. It's the best way to explain it. So he's been looking good. So just curious to see how all three of these young quarterbacks do in the spring, and if anyone emerges in spring ball, because they're going to be looking for a backup quarterback this year, with Emory Williams moving on. So one of these three guys will assume that role. And then, with Mark Fletcher and the running backs in general, Coach Dawson definitely feels good about that. But he said Mark Fletcher is one of the best leaders he's ever been around. And I think you've heard others just really rave about Fletcher, but I just think you can't say enough good things about him, and hearing that from the offensive coordinator is certainly a good thing. And then with the offensive line, yes, they're trying to figure out, who's going to be where and who's going to step up, but Coach Dawson just kind of backed up, just feels like he has plenty of confidence that Alex Mirabal will be able to put together a good offensive line and get these guys ready. So, we'll pay close attention to the names and see if any switches kind of come up, or some new names that kind of pop up with guys having good springs. And it's true, I mean, I say this all the time, but Coach Dawson mentioned it, so I'll just relay it. But just with the offensive line, defensive line play in general, it's hard to judge them when they're not in full pads, at least with the uppers, with the shoulder pads. So when they get those on, I think things will be a little bit different. You can kind of watch a little bit more, pay closer attention to those inside run drills and whatever else we're able to see. And I'm going to wrap everything up here. But I want to mention and recommend everybody to watch the video on the indoor practice facility update with the renovations. Definitely check out that video. And one of the things I wasn't able to say there that I want to make sure I include here, with the noise that's going on with the construction in terms of during practices or during the interviews, the post-practice interviews, you're going to hear noise. It was loud again today. Again, doing everything we can to kind of make it as best for the viewers and as you listen to it. But I wanted to pass this on. I found it to be interesting. So during Pro Day, the noise in the construction was going on. It was loud, and there was a lot of people in the building. Again, over 100 NFL personnel, here. Just it was a packed building, and UM, I was told this. UM actually asked to see, last week if they could, not have the construction that day, if they could take a day off, just because it was going to be a lot going on inside the facility. And what I was told was, essentially the way it works, and I don't know all the details, but once a construction project begins, you can't really take a day off or pause it. And if so, you have to resubmit a bunch of documents. Again, I don't know all the details, but that is why it continued. So they did look into it, and they just weren't able to. Maybe people that know more of the details can chime in the comments and provide some perspective on that. But that's kind of why some of this stuff is still going on. But they're going to keep working. And every time I've done those videos, and shout out to everybody who's watched them and enjoys it, there's just always people working. There's always people on the building. They're here all the time. So that's great. And that's why every time I do an update, every time I keep hearing about it, everything's on track for things to open in the summer. So definitely appreciate everybody there. Drop in the comments below. I will get to other positions. It's just hard these first couple days. So they're going to practice again tomorrow. Reporters aren't allowed to be out here, so won't be there for that. And then on Saturday, they're going to practice again for practice number 4. Being told to be able to be out here, but maybe just for interviews and not for a viewing period. So just kind of wrapping up the first week. I'll have videos of the wide receivers, so definitely stay tuned to that. And I've got more Pro Day videos as well. So thanks for watching. Have a good rest of the day, and take care.